So just continuing on these thoughts on really an exploration is what it is of applying the Buddha's teachings to loss, especially to the death of a loved one and the issues of grief. There's so much there, and I think before I go any further with this idea that I introduced yesterday of our grief being our collision with, coming up against our the four distortions, grasping the impermanent to be permanent, grasping things that are foul by nature to be pure, grasping at things that are in the very nature of dukkha as being happiness or a source of happiness, and grasping at things that have no intrinsic nature whatsoever as having a self that's permanent, independent, and truly existent. I think the issue of dealing with our feelings actually comes up before we can start to examine these four distortions. And so as I've been continuing to read other things, I thought, well, we should talk about that. Because when I'm talking here about applying the Buddha's teachings to our experience, to examine it and to learn from it, and to and also I would say to antidote our pain a bit. It's not about controlling the pain. It's not about not feeling the pain. It's not about denying that there are feelings there. Even one well-known Buddhist author is saying, has a little thing where she had this feeling that being a good Buddhist would mean she wouldn't feel her pain. I don't agree with that. I think being a good Buddhist means that we take our experience and apply what we've learned about the Buddha's teachings to test it. To use everything that we experience as the laboratory to, in my own language, to test if the Buddha was telling the truth. And I think this is this kind of really vivid experience gives us an opportunity to test our understanding of the nature of reality, our understanding of how suffering arises, and also to cultivate our compassion in a way that we don't get in a normal day-to-day, mundane existence. So it's actually a very, very rich opportunity to practice. So being a good Buddhist is about that. It's not about denying our pain. And, we are, or for sure I am, a suffering sentient being that is controlled by my karma and my afflictions, that does operate out of my root, ignorance and the craving for pleasure and all the delusions that arise out of that. So to be able to own that and then look, wow, this is the suffering result of that very state of mind. It's a very precious thing to do. So I think one of the things that I really experienced as I was in the Deep South, I was in the context of all my conditioning about family, religion, and so forth, that is one place we really have to pay attention when we're in that situation. Especially for those of us in the West for whom our Buddhist view, our way of being in the Dharma is an adopted cultivation, and our minds have changed and are changing. At the same time, we enter that family situation, or we enter a very highly emotional situation where there's lots of conditioning around what we should feel, how we should be, how we behave in the situation according to the family, and so forth and so forth. I mean, these are places that are really easy to get caught up and miss the opportunity to apply our analysis and our Buddhist understanding of the world. So there's no right way or wrong way to grieve. There's no such thing as, I don't think you actually can deny the pain. Sooner or later it's going to come out. My own mother actually did not cry when her mother died, but 10 years later, rummaging in a drawer, she came up with a pair of glasses of her mother's, and she was out for a week. Took a long time. So we as Buddhists can take the opportunity a little bit fresher. It's not about, so our practice is about attending the pain, actually. Not avoiding it, not denying it, but attending it. Also not indulging it. And that's a fine line. That's where our practice actually sits. When am I attending? When am I feeling that feeling? And when am I indulging in more pain than is necessary? So we've often heard teachings, and we can see this in our own minds, how first we experience the painful feeling, and then in response to that, trying to get away from the discomfort, comes the story about it. And it's the story often that becomes really the source of even greater suffering for ourselves and for the people around us. And that's where we get caught. We get caught in the story about our stuff. And then into the story comes the self-centered thought. I really had this kind of vivid thing that I wrote. It's like, okay, I cannot get into, my mother had a tragic accident. My mother died. I'm the one who had this loss. Then I've lost completely my aspiration to be of benefit in the entire situation, and I'm totally hung up in my own thing. But it's so easy to do when we don't give ourselves the time to attend to the feeling, acknowledge it, be with it, and instead let the story run us. So how do we deal with that? We go back to the teachings on the 4 establishments of mindfulness and just look at some of the simple ways we explore being with the feeling. So if we go back to that, then it's not about our emotions, but really looking at the very fundamental understanding that feeling is the nature of our experience, arises either as a painful feeling, a pleasurable feeling, a neutral feeling. Just these three. Just these three. And so, the instruction comes simply to, when the pain arises, to stop and observe the feeling. And we can watch it then, how quickly the mind takes that feeling and turns it into a story. Then we can start to catch it. We can also ask the question, why do I call this painful? Why am I calling this pain? What is the nature of this pain? Is it permanent? Where do I feel it? Is it in my body? Is it in my mind? How do I know what this is? And then see what the mind does in response, both to the feeling and to those questions. It's going to go different places and in different ways. But even then, even if we do the slightest little bit of analysis, it starts to take away the power that we give to this feeling arising, the story arising, and then I'm totally overwhelmed. And then I'm powerless to deal with the situation, right? So this practice that we did this winter was really phenomenally helpful. And then in this case, when we're looking at the loss of a loved one and we're looking at grieving, also notice how memory, past sense experience and how memory arises, invokes or evokes a feeling to arise, and then we're off and running again. So if we can take the time to attend those feelings, they inform incredibly our experience and also our understanding of the nature of reality, honestly. One experience I had was at my mom's funeral. It was in the yacht club where she and her husband have been members forever and forever and forever. So I was really grateful that it wasn't in church, because I've got enough conditioning around being in a Protestant church. And I thought, great. But the pianist sat down, very good, lovely pianist, sat down at the little pavilion piano and started in on this hymn. I don't know if you know it, but the words are, I walk through the garden alone while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear falling on my ear goes on and on and on about Jesus walks with me and he talks with me. It is my grandmother's favorite hymn. I know all the words. I've sung it a zillion times. I relate it to my grandmother, I relate it to my great-grandmother, I relate it to my mother, and I'm like, oh no. They're not singing them, but the words are going right through my head. So I'm doing my oh money pay me thing, pay me whom thing. Oh money pay me whom, 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 oh money pay me whom. I look around, my siblings are oblivious. They sat in the same church pews I did, but they are not having this reaction. So she finishes that one, and then she starts another old Baptist hymn, also totally familiar to my childhood. And then I caught it, and I was like, okay, what is the feeling? What is the feeling that's arising? It's not even an unpleasant feeling. It's kind of a pleasant feeling. What's the story? Oh, it's all about being in church and the warmth and the comfort of the family, and this will never come again. It's like, honey, that was 55 years ago. This hasn't existed for so long, you know, and just this little bit of analysis. Then I could put it down, not hear the hymns anymore, and one was able to fulfill my mission, which was for that day in the funeral, to really try to radiate love and compassion to everybody who was there. That was my assignment from Venerable Children. Radiate love and compassion at this event for everyone who came. So it doesn't take much analysis, but it does take enough experience to recognize these steps and to recognize that we can stop and catch the feeling before it overtakes us. So this, would inspire us to practice before we have these kinds of situations. But even we don't, if we can just begin to say, okay, here's a painful feeling arising. What is its nature? Why do I call it painful? What caused this feeling? Was it really an external stimulus? Was it even really an internal stimulus of my own? Can I even go to, oh, this painful feeling is arising as a result of my own past negative action? I mean, that may be a leap, but the teachings tell us that that's what's true. And in this way, we're again really using the experience to deepen our wisdom, to deepen our compassion, to deepen our understanding. And in that way, again, it becomes like this death is not in vain. This death is not useless. This death is really precious in terms of helping to create the causes for all of us to be free of death and rebirth again. Why? Because I want to use it as a fuel on my bodhisattva path to become a Buddha, to be able to help people to liberate ourselves from that. Joan Halifax has a couple of great quotes, many great quotes actually. But she has one that she says, grief can ruin us or mature us. And that's true. I mean, you don't have to be a Buddhist to know that. And that wonderful teaching Venerable Children gave a few days ago about how we're ennobled by our suffering or we're swamped by it. And how fortunate we are to be able to have the tools that the Buddha gave. How fortunate that we are to have a refuge that can help us understand and analyze what's going on around us. And then how fortunate we are to even have the little bit of whatever understanding of it we have, the aspiration to be of benefit rather than to become a victim of our own emotions. Not everybody at that funeral had that as a teaching. And so we can be really grateful and rejoice in this and use the analysis of feeling to really help us understand the nature of reality itself.